welcome back to BHookedCrochet.com as well as redheart.com. I'm your host Brittany, and in today's tutorial I'm going to demonstrate how to crochet the Baby Waves Afghan. This is a free pattern that's available at BHookedCrochet.com, and you can get the link to that pattern in the description below. To complete your Baby Waves Afghan, you're going to need 3 skeins of blueberry, 1 skein of Bluie, 1 skein of Dolphin, 1 of Sky, 1 of Pool, and 1 of Teddie. You're also going to need a size 6.5mm hook, a darning needle, and a pair of scissors. To begin our baby Afghans, we want to first create a slip knot, and starting out we're going to be using the blueberry colorway. So place that loop on your hook, and now we need to make 107 chains. In doing so, our blanket will measure approximately 40 inches wide. Once you've completed your foundation chain, we're going to start off with the first row. And this pattern is very simple. There's really only one pattern repeat. So we're going to be doing the same thing for every single row. So to start things off, we want to start counting back some of these chains. So the loop on our hook never counts as a chain. And bear with me, this is a darker yarn, but I'm going to point out the stitches here. So we want to count back to the 5th chain. So again, we're not counting that loop. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to put my finger on that 5th chain because that's where we want to work our first stitches. Now we're going to be working in double crochets, and so to make a double crochet we want to yarn over, insert our hook into that 5th chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, and pull through the remaining 2. Now we want to repeat that. We're going to make a double crochet into the same chain. Now let's pause for a quick second to talk about what this chain represents, because understanding what each chain represents is going to help you have straighter edges on your blanket. So we have a total of 4 chains that are loose here, and we worked our 2 double crochets into the 5th chain. So the 4 chains, that's going to be 1 double crochet, so that's equivalent. A double crochet is the equivalent of 3 chains high. So 3 of those chains count as a double crochet, and then 1 of the chains is going to act as a spacer. So we're just counting that as a chain. And that'll make sense when we talk about what to do next. So we worked our 2 double crochets into that chain. We're going to skip the next chain. So we're going to skip that, and we're going to work 2 double crochets into the next. And we're not going to make a chain or anything in between. We're just going to be working our 2 double crochets, skipping a chain. So we'll skip the next and work 2 double crochets into the next. And our stitch count is evening out this way. So we have 2 stitches in 1 essentially, and we're skipping a stitch in between. So we're not actually increasing or decreasing throughout this pattern. We want to keep it the same. And that is the pattern repeat for this row and for all the remaining rows. We'll talk about how to build upon this foundation row as we go along. But for now, what I need for you to do is finish crocheting the first row. So finish making all of your double crochets into your chains. Don't forget to skip a chain in between, and then we'll talk about what to do next. If you've been working your pattern correctly and if you counted your foundation chains the right way when you got started, you should end up with 2 chains here on the end. So I'm working my last little cluster of 2 double crochets right there, and then I'm skipping a stitch just like normal. We want to make sure that we have 1 double crochet into the last chain. Okay, so that way we're going to have a mirror image on both sides. If you remember at the beginning, I told you that the chain 4 that we have here counts as a double crochet and as a chain. And then if we look down at this end, we have a chain and a double crochet. So making sure that you're doing that at the end of every row is going to make your sides straight, and it's going to help you throughout the rest of this pattern. Now we're going to move on to row 2, and this row is going to serve as a demonstration for the remaining rows. So as you can see by the pictures, the blanket has a big solid section where we're working with this blueberry colorway. Now we're going to talk about how to begin row 2, but also know that this is the pattern repeat for this entire blanket. We're just going to be repeating the same row, what we're going to be demonstrating in row 2. So to start off, we need to chain 3, and that chain 3 is acting as a double crochet. Now we can turn our work Next we want to locate the 2 double crochets from the row before. So you can see those right there. And we're going to make 2 double crochets in between those 2 stitches. Okay, so we don't have to work in either of the stitches, just pull them apart. I like to stick my finger in there to kind of let me know where I need to put my hook, and just make 2 double crochets in that space. Then you'll locate the next 2 double crochets and make 2 double crochets in between them. Find the next 2, make 2 double crochets, and the next one. And that's our pattern repeat for this row and for each of the remaining rows in this afghan. So you can see as you're working these double crochets in between the 2 from the row below that it really opens up the double crochets and you can really see that V stitch. Now go ahead and finish crocheting this second row, and we'll talk about how we're supposed to finish off when we get to the end. Once you've made it to the end of your row, you want to make sure that you make your last 2 double crochets right there in between the last set of double crochets from the row before. Now we can't end things there because if we do, we'll be missing a stitch, and so if we do that, then our blanket, instead of being straight along the edges, will kind of go in this inward direction. So we need to make a double crochet in this 3rd chain in order to have everything be even. So we just want to locate the top chain. I'm going to count them out for you. So we have the 1st chain here, the 2nd, and the 3rd. Now from this angle, we're looking at the chains from behind, so you'll see the back bump there. And what I like to do is work into 2 of the loops of the chain, but you can just catch the top one right here, or what I do is I catch that back bump. So I have 2 loops. Just helps to keep things a little more secure, but it really doesn't matter either way. You can work it in however you like. As long as you're consistent throughout your blanket, then you won't notice a difference. So now you can see that makes the edge look much more straight and even. And now we're ready to begin the 3rd row. As I mentioned before, this pattern is a very simple 1-row repeat, and so we've already gone through everything that you're going to need to finish up this part of the blanket. So I'll get you started on row 3. We're going to make 3 chains. That's going to act as a double crochet. Then we turn our work. And then we're just going to continue by putting 2 double crochets in between each of our groups from the row before. And when you end this row, you're going to do just like we did in the previous clip where we made a double crochet into the 3rd chain. Okay, so what I need for you to do now is finish crocheting. It's going to be about 2/3 of the blanket. So by the time we come back, we'll have our blankets about 2/3 of the way done. We want to continue crocheting rows just like this until our blanket measures 20 inches long, or approximately. As long as it's pretty close to 20 inches, then we'll be on the right track. So go ahead and finish crocheting your blankets until it measures 20 inches from the bottom here all the way up to where you stop is at 20 inches. Then we come back, we'll talk about how to do all of our color transitions. So that's where we're going to get into the color work of this pattern. So off camera, I went ahead and crocheted about 2/3 of my pattern. So what I have here is my blanket, and it measures about 20 inches from bottom to top where I ended this row. Now we can go ahead and bind off. So we're just going to trim ourselves a tail. We want to leave it long enough so that we can weave it in. And at this point, you just want to take that tail and pull it through the loop on your hook. That's going to secure things off. Now we want to maintain the pattern where we're flipping it back and forth after every row. So I just crocheted in this direction, so when I bind on the next color, I want to do it from the other side, so I'm still continuing to crochet in my usual direction. So we'll get that set up. Grab your skein of the Bluie yarn. That's going to be the first color that we use. So I have my Bluie yarn here ready to go, and I want to locate the double crochet stitch. And I'm just going to insert my hook into that stitch. Okay, just leave that there. Now we'll create a slip knot with our new yarn, again leaving yourself a tail long enough to weave in. Now place that loop on your hook and pull it through the stitch. Now we want to chain 3. And we're ready to continue just like we have before. So we'll go through this color transition here for the first color change, and everything from here on out is going to be the same. Okay, so the pattern change is not, we're not having a pattern change at all. We just need to change colors. So I'm just locating my first group of double crochets and just finish up this row. So I've come to the end of my first row with my new color change, and I just want to work a double crochet into that 3rd chain. So just like we have been doing, I wanted to show you on camera one more time just so you don't forget. And we're just going to be working these color rows just in sets of 1. So we're just going to do one color or one row for each color, and we are going to be repeating them. So when you come to the end of your row, we can go ahead and bind off, and we'll do that just like before. Pull that through. So off camera I have gone through an entire color pattern repeat, and I wanted to take a minute to let you know exactly which colors you're working with so that you know how to organize them and how many color pattern repeats that you need to do for the blanket. So the first color you're going to be working with, we talked about this earlier on in the video, this is the colorway Bluie. Then we have Dolphin, Sky, Pull, and Teddie. And then we're just going to repeat. So from here I'm going to start off again with Bluie, Dolphin, Sky, Pull, and Teddie. We want to do a total of 3 color pattern repeats. So this is 1, starting over would be 2, and starting over again will be 3. Go ahead and crochet your 3 color pattern repeats as indicated here and in the written instructions, and we'll meet back up and we'll talk about how to finish off the afghan, and then we'll move on to the border. So off camera I completed my 3 color pattern repeats. So as you can see I have 3 rows of each one of the colors. Now what we need to do is start working on the final stretch of our blankets. And we're going to join on with our blueberry color again. So you should have about 2/3 of a skein left at this point. If you're running a little bit low, you might want to make a quick stop and pick up another skein. So what we're going to be doing with that blueberry is we're going to add 6 more rows of this V-stitch, and we're also going to go around the entire blanket 1 time. So you want to make sure that you have enough yarn for those few steps. When you're binding on, you want to make sure that you're keeping up with your same pattern. So when I finished this last row in the Teddie colorway, I was working from this direction over. So you can see this is my last double crochet here. So I still want to flip my work, so this is something you're already familiar with. And we're going to bind on now working in this direction. And you'll bind on in that first double crochet, just like you did on all of your color changes. And we'll chain 3. Now we'll quickly go through this row. There's nothing different that we're doing at this point. We're just doing our row of this modified V-stitch, and we're doing it in the same exact way. So I'll demonstrate the first couple of stitches. That chain 3 is counting as a double crochet, and I'm just going to work 2 in between those 2 double crochets from below. And then work 2 double crochets in the next. And so you're familiar with this. We probably don't have to go into any more detail because by this point you're a pro at this stitch. So what we need to do to finish our afghans, we need to finish up the length a little bit more, and we're going to do that by making 6 more rows of working in V-stitch with the blueberry yarn. Okay, so we're not going to change colors for 6 rows. We're just going to work this blueberry, and once you are finished working those 6 rows, then you'll come back to the video. We'll talk about the next steps that we need to take, and at this point we're in the final stretch. There's not much left to do to finish up this blanket. So now what I've done here off camera is I have crocheted my 6 rows using that blueberry colorway again. And if you're using a different color yarn, then it's just going to be the same color that you started your blanket with. Okay, so we have our 6 rows of that background color, and blueberry for me. Now what we want to do is bind off. We're going to start playing with some color changes again. And what we're doing for the next several rows is exactly what we did for this section right here, where we did all of the color changes. So we actually don't need to cover this in the video. We've covered it previously. What we're going to do is do 3 color pattern repeats, and it's going to be exactly the same as what you've done here. So we're going to start off with this colorway here called Bluie, then Dolphin, Sky, Pull, and Teddie. And that's one color repeat. Then we're going to start over and work those 5 accent colors, and we'll start over again with those 5 accent colors. So go ahead and pause this video, work up your last section of the color repeat, and then what we'll be ready to do is start working on the waved border up at the top, and then we'll talk about how to do the border around the sides and the bottom. So what I've done off camera up to this point is I have completed 3 more color transitions, so the color pattern transition. So this is exactly the same as what we did before, when then we had our 6 rows of the blueberry colorway, and then we have another color pattern. Now we just have 2 more steps to completing our afghans. And we're going to start off by that top border, this wave pattern, and we're just going to do it along the top side of the afghan, and then we're going to just crochet a simple single crochet border around the edges to sort of clean things up. So what you'll need now is your Bluie colorway. That's what we're going to be doing the wave border up at the top, and you want to find the edge that is where you bind it off before. So I bind it off on the Teddie right here, and then we flip our work just to continue the pattern. So this first row we want to bind on, and we're going to do so in the same place, so in that double crochet stitch, and chain 3. And this row is going to be a preparation for our waved edge. So all we're going to do is make 1 double crochet into every stitch. And I'll demonstrate that a few times since we're kind of coming off of this modified V-stitch pattern. Instead of working in between the double crochets like we're used to, we're just going to work in the stitches. So I'm locating that first stitch there. And then the next stitch you can see right here, or flipping it up, you can see the V. And then we move on to the next. So this is the next stitch here. And we just want to repeat that for this row. So back at the other side, it's helpful if you count your stitches, because for this border we need it to be in a specific multiple. But I wanted to remind you, the last stitch is going to be worked in this chain 3. Okay, so this is my 103rd double crochet, and now I need 104, and so I'm going to make my last stitch in that top chain. And now we're ready to move on to the really cool part. So all I've done off camera here is just rotated my work, and I'm going to chain 3. And that's because we are continuing to work in double crochets, and this chain 3 is going to count as 1 double crochet. So when you're working on this edging pattern, whether it be for this blanket or if you're going to use it for a different project, you want to make sure that your number of stitches that you're going to be working this pattern is in a multiple of 4. So we have 104 stitches, so we should be good to go. Now what we need to do is make 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. And so that chain 3 again is counting as a stitch. So we want to work our first stitch right here. Okay, once you have your 4 double crochet stitches, including that chain 3, now we're going to chain 3. And then we just want to flip our work, and we're going to slip stitch in the 3rd chain. Okay, so I've just got my work rotated the other way so I can see that third chain right there. Just insert your hook and slip stitch. So pull that through and through. Okay, so now your work looks something like this. Now we're going to chain 3, and this is counting as a double crochet, and we're going to flip our work back over so that it's in the right direction. So this is where we started. And just for the edges here, we're going to be making a total of 5 double crochets in this chain space. And so we have the chain 3 that counts as 1, so make 4 more double crochets into that chain space. Okay, so now your work should look something like this. And at this point, we want to locate our very next stitch on this row where we started. So then I just want to double crochet into that stitch, and see how that kind of pulls this piece down? This is what gives it that waving effect. And I'm working my double crochet stitch under both of those loops of the V. Now that was 1 double crochet. We need to make 3 more into each of the next few stitches. So 1 double crochet and 2 and 3. So just keep that in mind. Anytime you're working in this row right here, you're going to be making 4 double crochet stitches. And once you've made your 4, then we can chain 3 and then flip your work over. And now here is where things get a little bit different. So when we worked that first one, we worked our slip stitch into that chain. Now we want to do things a little different. So holding your work like this, there are 2 main holes. So we have the hole here that's in between that 4th and 5th double crochet, and then we have the hole from where our chain was. So what you need to do is insert your hook into that first hole and then come out through the chain. Okay, and then grab your working yarn and pull it through and then through the loop on your hook. So we're just slip stitching. Okay, once you're at this point, then we can flip our work back the other way, and we're going to immediately start double crocheting. So don't chain or anything for this part. And this time we're going to make 7 double crochets into this chain space, and that's going to be the case until we reach the other end of the blanket. Now once you've made your 7 double crochets into that space, then we just repeat. So we find that next double crochet and make a double crochet into that stitch, and then 1 into each of the next 3. Okay, so here's where we are at this point. And now keep this in mind, we're just repeating everything we did from here. Now we'll chain 3, flip our work over, and we want to locate those 2 holes, so you can see them right here. Insert your hook in this hole and out the other. And then slip stitch. Flip your work back over. You want to keep your yarn in the correct place. There we go. Now make 7 double crochets in this chain space. Then once you've made your 7 double crochets, then we just simply repeat. So find that next double crochet, and that is the pattern repeat for this row. So go ahead and finish working up this wave pattern. If you're struggling a little bit, you can simply go back and watch the demonstration again. Everything is going to be exactly the same, and you should work out so that your last double crochet, when you're doing this 4 double crochet section, should end up in your last stitch. Now if that is not the case, then you'll want to go back and recount your stitches because you don't have a multiple of 4. So there'll be a little bit of troubleshooting involved if that's the case for you. Otherwise, once you get to that point, come back to this video. We'll talk about how to finish off that other edge because it is going to be slightly different than what we've done for these 2 repeats here. Okay, so I have gone all the way to the other side of my afghan. I saved this last one to demonstrate on camera because it's slightly different than the rest that we've worked throughout here. So I stopped with my 7th double crochet. I'm just going to finish on like normal by making a double crochet into each of the last 4 stitches. And just a little reminder that our last stitch is that chain 3. So I'm going to make my last double crochet into that 3rd chain. And we'll chain 3 just like we were doing before, and we'll rotate our work just so we can catch this little section right here. So slip stitching, and then we'll just rotate it back. Now here's where the difference is. Instead of making 7 double crochets into this chain space, we're only going to make 5. Now one final finishing touch here. We just want to locate that last double crochet. You see that little loop right here? That is the front loop of my last double crochet stitch. I want you to just slip stitch into that loop. And that's going to continue on with this pattern where it's sort of pulled down in that direction. Okay, and that completes the waved edge border. Now we can go ahead and bind off. And now the last step is to do a single crochet border around the entire blanket. So before we can add the single crochet border around the afghan, we have to do the dreaded task of weaving in your ends, unless you've been really diligent and woven them in already. So just to quickly demonstrate that, what I like to do is tie the 2 ends together in a knot, and this is just a way of securing it a little bit more. I know baby items typically get a lot of use and they'll go through several washes, so we just want to make sure our color transitions here don't give us a problem in the future. Now we're going to weave these in on the back, and just to quickly demonstrate what is the front here. So where our wave looks like this is the front of our blanket. So we want to weave them in on the back side. So what you want to do is thread your darning needle, and really the only thing you need to watch out for is that you're weaving them in under the proper color. So just in case it shows through a little bit, that way you know you're weaving it in under the correct color. So I usually work it under a few stitches in one direction and then turn around. You'll want to skip one loop so you don't weave it back out, and then just work under a few more stitches. And if you have enough room, you can weave it back through again. If not, you can go ahead and trim off that end. And then just repeat that for all of your color transitions. So once you've finished weaving in all of your ends, we have our top border. The only thing that's left to do is to just put a single crochet border around the entire afghan. Now, this step is completely optional. It's just a way to sort of finish out the edges and give them a nice cleaner look. So you can really start this at any point. I recommend, so that way you don't have to bind off and bind on multiple times, is starting at the top left corner if you're right-handed, or the top right corner if you're left-handed. So I'm going to be working from here and then working on down to the first corner there at the bottom. So we're just going to create a slip knot. And the goal is to make 2 single crochets around every one of the double crochets that we had on the side. Remember how we did just 1 double crochet on either end? That's what we're going to be working around. So when you bind on, find the double crochet that's right there at the bottom of your little wave at the end. And then chain 1. Now that's going to act as our first single crochet. So then all we want to do is make a single crochet around that stitch. So we're not putting our hook into the side of the stitch or anything like that. We're simply working around. This makes things just a little bit easier for us as we move along. So the next row down, we're coming to a chain. So this is where we chained up to start this row. And we're going to treat this the same. We just want to stick our hook just directly underneath that chain, and then make a single crochet, and then do that one more time. So we have a total of 2. And then we'll just move on. It's really easy to tell how you're working this border when you're working on these color transitions, because you can see where you need to work based on the colors. So I just worked on the tan or the Teddie colorway. Now here I've got the pool. And this is the pattern repeat. I'll demonstrate how we're going to work the corners, but everything else from here on out is going to be the same. We just want to make 2 single crochets around each of the double crochets on the side. So the bottom will be a little bit different because our pattern is a different direction there. So we'll also demonstrate that in the tutorial as well. So now I've made it to that bottom corner, and this is where we had our very first starting chain. So we're going to continue by making 2 single crochets around that chain, and then we want to chain 2. That's going to create the corner for us, and then we'll rotate our work and make 2 single crochets in that same chain space. Now what we want to do is make 2 single crochets in between each one of our V's. And that's all we're going to do differently for the bottom part. Okay, so when you get to the other corner, we're going to do the same thing that we did before. I'm finding that little space in between my last double crochet and then my V stitch there, and we just want to make 2 single crochets in that space. And then chain 2, rotate your work, and make 2 single crochets around that double crochet. Now all that's left to do is make 2 single crochets around each of the double crochet posts all the way up this side, and then we'll bind off, weave in our ends, and our blankets will be complete. Once you've made it all the way around, you'll just make your last 2 single crochets around that double crochet post, and then we're ready to bind off. Then all that's left to do is weave in this end and the end on the other side where we started the single crochet round. This concludes our tutorial on the Baby Waves Afghan. Please share your pictures with me on social media using hashtag BHooked on Instagram or on Facebook. I would love to see your blankets, and if you've changed up the colors in any way, I'd love to see what you've done with this pattern. A big thanks to our sponsor, Red Heart Yarns, for providing us with today's amazing Baby Hugs yarn for this project. On behalf of BHookedCrochet.com as well as RedHeart.com, I'm your host, Brittany. We'll see you next time.